What Justice Looks Like in Black and White. Hosted by Harold Fisher, this three-part virtual town hall edition will address the current unrest around the country. You'll hear from activists and legal and political experts.
We are out here. We are scared.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Harold Fisher. This is part one of a special three-part series on the Daily Drum. This is what justice looks like in black and white, an examination of issues that have come into focus since the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Tonight, the focus is no justice, no peace. What are the demands? How are they achieved? This is being heard on WHUR FM, WHUT TV, and all WHUR social media platforms. No phone calls tonight, but you can comment and ask questions on our social media platforms. My guests tonight are activist and attorney Dr. Malik Zulu Shabazz, Andre Watkins, activist and creative freedom fighter, and Michael Griffin, electoral organizer with Community Change. Let's start with Andre Watkins. Andre, thanks for joining the program. I appreciate it.
No problem, Harold. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Young person that you are, activist that you are. Talk to me about your experiences. You've been really out in it protesting.
Yeah, I have been out. I've been going out since this past Saturday. My first protest or direct action that I participated in was with the Black Lives Matter DC chapter, run by leaders April Goggins, Mimi Tay, and Makia Green. They hosted a car caravan, a moving protest. So basically, protesters came out, got in their cars, and drove to a location, protested, throughout the city in their cars. Because one of the biggest things that BLM is trying to ensure is that we are keeping ourselves safe, considering COVID-19 and considering the impact of COVID-19 on marginalized communities, those being Black and brown people. They wanted to make sure that we remain safe. We practice social distancing. So we rode around the city, protesting in our cars. And then when we got to a location, we made sure that we were practicing social distancing, very family oriented, joy-filled and liberating direct action. I've also been out to the Capitol. Most recently, I actually just came back from this afternoon out with Freedom Fighters DC, an organization based in DC, fighting for the freedom of Black folk. And that action, we actually went out to the Capitol, and that one was a bit more intense. We went out and laid on our face for nine minutes, about the amount of time that George Floyd had to be on his neck, painted our hands red to symbolize the blood on the hands that police officers who have committed police brutality hold on their hands. Moment of silence for George Floyd. And it was really, really intense, really emotional. So there's been different, just different levels of emotion that I've experienced. But I think, if I have time to just mention this, the most impactful direct action that I participated in, and not only today, well, I had actually gone out after curfew in DC. It was around 12 a.m. I saw some things happening on CNN, just decided to run out there with my fiance, jumped out, went out to headed toward the White House. And as I was out there, I'm a videographer as well as, as a beat maker. And so I wanted to capture some video of just the things that were happening, of, some of the things that were destroyed on behalf of like this movement. And so I was capturing footage, and a police officer in a car had approached me and a few other protesters, and it told us we needed to leave. It's past curfew. We didn't leave. We stick around. And so I would imagine that this officer got on the radio and called his fellow police officers, because what ended up happening is seconds later, after he gave us our couple of warnings, 6 officers drove past, and all you saw was fog. I didn't know what the fog was. I thought something was burning. And my fiance says, wait, that's not fog, that's not burning, or smoke, that's pepper spray. Suddenly you could hear your eyes are burning, my face is burning. And so that was my first moment ever experiencing that. It was painful, didn't feel good, and definitely felt unsafe.
I want to go down, I want to drill down a little bit more on that, but I want to go to some of the latest news that everyone has been hearing today. I want to talk to Mike Griffin. Mike Griffin is now part of the conversation from Minneapolis. Mike, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. I want to talk to you about your reaction to the announcement today by Minnesota's Attorney General Keith Ellison that there was an upgrade or an amendment to the charges for Derek Chauvin and the other 3 former officers who have now been charged with aiding and abetting to second-degree murder.
So first off, can you hear me? Am I good?
Yes, you're fine. Go right ahead, please.
Okay. All right. So I was just down at Cup Foods. Sorry for being a little bit late, but there's a lot of traffic out there. I think the feeling is it's about time. It's about time for us to actually get what we deserve, and that's justice for George. A step in the right direction. I think it is for these folks to be walking around in the city for 8-9 days after choking out George for 8.5 minutes on camera. It's exactly part of the systemic problems we're facing in this country. We want justice for George, so we got to charge these cops. They're going to go through a trial, and hopefully they go to jail. There's a whole path to get there. But right now, what I'm saying is that the structure in this country is messed up. And in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year, we're going to be at the same very spot. So congratulations. Thank you for let's charging these cops. Everybody else in the world who kills somebody on camera for 8.5 minutes is going to go to jail very quickly. So great. They've gotten charged. Now the next step is to make sure this doesn't happen again and this stop happening in America. And what does that look like? That is a conversation I want to start having. I'm 34 years old. I remember the Rodney King riots. I was 5, right? So the amount of time, like what has changed in this country? I got a 7-year-old nephew now. It's great to get justice for George, but what I'm fighting for is to make sure that my 7-year-old nephew don't come and be 34 years old having riots in his city because we have not done anything in America to actually change the structure of police accountability in this country.
Talk to me a little bit about the mood in Minneapolis. If you could ascribe a emotion to a city right now, what would it be?
We're pissed off. We are pissed off. And this is my media, right? So I can say this here and speak freely. Black folks in this city are pissed. And the reason why is that we have been beating a drum in this city and state for years. This is not the first murder of a Black guy. 5 years ago, Jamar Clark, a lot of brothers saying he was handcuffed. Google this, Jamar Clark, 6 years ago, killed by police. A lot of people said he was handcuffed. We waited 6-7 months for them to release a video camera. They released a dash camera. They didn't end up charging the cops. A year later, Philando Castile, killed with his daughter in the back seat of his car, streamed live on Facebook for the world to see, right? And we have been beating a drum. And this goes to the city, this goes to the state. And then now we have this case of someone being murdered in broad daylight with teenagers videotaping him, begging him to stop, and this man crying for his mother. And our city and our county attorney gets on camera and says, you know what? Hey, we need more evidence. Please come. If you have any more evidence of what happened before or after, please, I want to build this case. The fervor in this city was at a boiling point at that matter. And we focused our energy on that precinct. And for days, we had been going toe-to-toe with a lot of police aggression. As the sister just said before me, they aren't playing around. We're talking about giant military guns on streets with laser points, and anybody that's leading the chant gets a laser pointed towards them as if we're in a war, right? Canisters of tear gas being shot, that's illegal in times of war, being shot out into it hit a Somali girl across her, bust her head open, bleeding from the head, nowhere to go. A Black guy races her off. Like, it was real out there. And so when I say our anger was at that precinct, and the images that y'all saw in America was the frustration in this city that has been building up over generations. And his death was the final straw. That was that image of the police, of the burning, was an image of white supremacy that we wanted on fire. It was a release.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I was there, I might have handed them a lighter. Watching that. There were fireworks. There was Beyonce in the streets. They were for once we were happy. It was a Black utopia with a burning precinct. It was beautiful. It felt like Black Independence Day. They had fireworks going. There was a precinct burning. Beyonce was playing, and people were doing the electric slide, and they're handing out beer.
Andre, let me ask you, because we have seen protests in big cities, small cities, towns, even today. There was a really muscular protest in Harford County, north of Baltimore County. Right. Dozens and dozens of people. When you were protesting, were you angry? Were you encouraged? What was your feeling while you were there? For her, I'm asking Andre, the young sister who's there, because I want to kind of compare and contrast, the various and sundry places. Okay. Andre, please go right ahead.
So obviously emotion filled, anger, sadness, feelings of, somber feelings. But honestly, just feeling that it is my duty. It's my duty to be out there. I work with young people, and I have worked with young people as an educator it's been about a decade. I have a young niece, as my brother spoke before me, just having young people in your life, going out there and fighting so that they don't have to is very important to me. It is my duty to go out there in those streets and to do what I can to show up and to move forward this movement for Black lives. I feel like it's a part of my legacy. I would never want to get to the point where I have my little niece who is a year old learning about COVID-19 and George Floyd, and to ask me, well, what were you doing? And I'm like, oh, well, I was in my house, and there wasn't really much that I could do. COVID-19, the pandemic, absolutely not. No, I'm taking my little behind, my little scrawny behind out there, and I'm going to be in the forefront. I'm going to do what I can to make sure that I'm pushing this movement forward. And so being out there, I will say one thing that was extremely hard for me is seeing 6 and 7 year olds out there protesting. There were young girls. I've seen young girls and young men, young people out there protesting with their families, crying. I just had a goddaughter call me yesterday, crying, boo-hooing, crying. I don't want anyone to be hurt. I don't want these white people to harm these Black people anymore. I don't want these people to harm these protesters. I do this so that the people that look up to me, the young people that I work with every single day, my little niece and anyone else that's a young person, does not have to take on this fight later on. This is why I do it, and that's exactly my mindset when I'm out there.
Mike, here's something that I've been thinking about over the past couple of days. For a lot of young people who came well after the civil rights movement, whenever we've seen police brutality or any example of racism, just Black and white, bold letter racism, you have people who are marching. And a lot of young people say, it's time to stop marching and do something. But this is different, because the marching isn't just March on Washington and speeches. To be quite honest, there aren't a whole lot of well-known names speaking. These are grassroots, community, neighborhood, next door people who are pissed off. Talk to me a little bit about why this is different, because it's also happening around the world.
So I've been to hundreds of protests in this country, dozens of Black Lives Matter protests. I would say in the past week, this is the most organic, young. These folks are, I'm 34. These are 18, 19, 20, 23 year olds. And I did the Obama. I'm the Obama generation. I started with Obama. They're smarter. They're better. They're more innovative. I knew where to go was they were streaming it live on Facebook. And then the police tried to zap their power So then they just had their friends go out and get their more battery power. So they had batteries on batteries on batteries. So everybody knew where to go. So it was very organic. This was not a black pastor or an organization saying, hey, we're going to do this there, and this is the speeches, and we're going to do that. No, these are young people organically standing up around the city and state, and other people are following them. And I'm telling you, they're more innovative, they're smarter, they're hungrier, and there are, I feel like we're going to be in good hands because these folks aren't messing around, and they're not going to take no for an answer. They're going to demand justice and demand equality. And I'm honored to be in their space, to be honest with you.
I want to talk about that in a bit also, but I want to remind our listeners and viewers that this is the first of a 3-part series. Tonight, Thursday night, and Friday. No justice, no peace. What are the demands and how are they achieved? That's what we're focusing on tonight. This entire series is justice in black and white as we examine the issues that have come into focus since the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. I want to introduce my new guest to the program, activist and attorney Dr. Malik Zulu Shabazz, also previously joining us, Andre Watkins, activist and creative freedom fighter, and of course, Michael Griffin, electoral organizer with Community Change. He is coming to us from Minneapolis. Dr. Shabazz, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
It's my honor, Brother Harold, and to the great activists. You all are warming me up.
Well, thank you so much. Well, we need to get warmed up and continue to stay hot on this issue. Talk to me a little bit about the legality of what happened today. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison announcing the amending of the charges for Derek Chauvin and the other 3 officers. Simple question, why did it take so long? Everyone wants to know.
It took this amount of time because they were not going to do this at all. They were not going to charge Chauvin with second degree murder, probably not even third degree murder. I have to be honest with you. If what happened in Minnesota, I have to be straight honest. If that police precinct did not burn down,
you better preach, brother.
We wouldn't be at this moment.
You better preach.
If that courthouse
you better preach.
In Nashville didn't burn down, we wouldn't even be thinking about this moment.
Come on, Howard.
Keith Ellison would not be pressing the case. This has turned my brother, Mr. Harold, and you all into a matter of national security. And therefore, they don't mind giving Derek Chauvin a charge which would give him perhaps 40 years versus 25 years in order to save the country. When Donald Trump went out and attacked those teenagers, some of whom I'm likely to represent, and I've been out there as a legal monitor at that White House. Andre, I was out there because of you all. Because of your spirit and the spirit you all have put in the country. It's not a riot. The Declaration of Independence say it is a rebellion. And if it wasn't the Boston Tea Party riot, then this is the George Floyd rebellion right here. Now, what I'm saying is that this is driving the legal action. The activists, the street, and the organizers are forcing Donald Trump and forcing the attorney generals and forcing the governors to go back and to try to give us tokens of justice. And all we have to do now is not be satisfied with the tokens. None of us as lawyers and even prosecutors or anyone can work outside of the will of the people. I guarantee you, if this would have been a few statements from the normal, traditional, controlled Black leaders and that was it, trust me, this guy would be charged maybe with manslaughter, or maybe say we're going to wait some weeks, and the other 3 officers, Tao, Lane, and Kuhn, wouldn't have been charged. So we have to say thank you to the people and all power to the people.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the legal pieces here, because one of the things I just find fascinating. Yes, I understand that police officers, when it comes to arresting them, charging them, prosecuting them. That historically there's been what some may say is a higher standard. But I guess the thing that is so troubling is when the Hennepin County District Attorney said we need more evidence, and then almost miraculously, the other video showed that there were two more officers kneeling on George Floyd, preventing him not just from breathing, but from moving. And that is the thing that I find so disconcerting. Some people say this has happened quickly. Yes, compared to other officers, it may have. But this is not fake news. We've seen this. Talk to me a little bit, Brother Shabazz, about why, from a legal perspective, the aiding and abetting is so significant for the two officers who were kneeling on George Floyd and the other officer who was trying to block the view of the people who were videotaping.
It's significant here because normally police officers are not charged when they are on the scene and they could do something and they don't do it, or when they assist in these actions. Just normally they're not charged, so it's significant. Now the state says that the manner of death is homicide, but that is autopsy is cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual restraint and neck compression. That they put so much pressure on his neck that he had a heart attack. And then there was an independent autopsy that's done by the attorneys that say it was mechanical asphyxiation. It is either way you slice it, it is the officer's knee for those 8 minutes and 40 seconds on his neck, combined with all of the other officers on him at the same time, on Floyd at the same time, with all of that pressure on his body. Now I understand that he may have had some underlying medical conditions, what I'm reading. And this is why you don't do that. This is why the Constitution says you only use enough force that is reasonably necessary, or otherwise you've crossed over to excessive force on the civil level, or you've crossed over into the criminal level now. Chauvin is charged with second-degree murder now, the intentional killing of another without premeditation. Most people who watch it say that was premeditated. At any rate, the fact that everyone is being held accountable here is significant, and it is unprecedented. And I think the struggle right now is it's not just, it's for justice here and for every officer in this case, but what you're seeing around this country is a desire for a systematic change. The verdict is still out on whether that systematic change will occur, and we must keep driving for it right now. I mean, but there are significant, unprecedented legal developments that are occurring in this hour. Normally, they don't go after police officers this hard.
Yeah, and maybe it's because of the graphic nature of that video. That I would argue, yeah, we see it in the movies, but when we see it in real life, it is real life.
Remember this now, he's
real death in real life video. And so
he's handcuffed. And so you can imagine how many times this has occurred. And when they've written those reports up and said something different, how many brothers have died in the streets and false reports and no video was there. And now what you're dealing with here is a situation where the public is just not satisfied with what it used to be satisfied with. The public is not satisfied with what it used to be satisfied with. And the question is, can a systematic change be brought about? See, these brothers and sisters, and even other people, I've seen them out there of all ages. This pain is deep.
Yes, it is.
And it's not going to be absolved just because Chauvin is charged.
Let me go back to Mike
resolved.
on that particular point. Mike, it's my understanding there's only been one conviction of a police officer.
Of a black man.
A black man, yes.
A black man who hit a white woman is the only one who's ever been charged.
Who shot a white woman. How confident are you that the wheels of justice will be straight and narrow and right in this?
Okay.
So I think I'm not sure if he's going to be convicted. I think that the evidence is overwhelming in this case, and it's moving in that direction. But to Brother Shabazz's point is this: we need to get to. So we're going to get justice for George, probably, likely, maybe. But what are we doing for the systematic changes? For example, we just talked about how the police report was wrong. Somebody lied on the police report. Somebody approved that police report, and somebody signed off on that police report. The medical examiner did not have the same information that the police report had. Why is that? Who approved that? Why is it that every other case that we've ever had in Minnesota, the prosecutor would say there's not enough evidence to charge? And before we burned down the precinct, as Dr. Shabazz just said, he was still saying, oh, we were going to have an investigation for days, if not weeks and weeks and weeks. So the structure in itself has not changed at all for me to be convinced that I'm not next, or my brother's not next, or my nephew's not next 20 years from now. So I'm going to still be in these streets, right? And I think that let's get justice for George, yes, but let's not get distracted on this hamster wheel. A black guy gets killed, we go in the street, we get distracted, another black guy gets killed. Black guy, and we just going on back, and let's keep this going, and let's keep it going. Let's not. Let's get off this cycle and have a difficult conversation with white people who need to have a difficult conversation with themselves about how we can change the structures of the system. Another example, there were cops that arrested a black CNN reporter live on TV.
Yes.
Those cops are still working, right? So as much as the governor of Minnesota wants to get up there and say Black Lives Matter, he went to Cup Food today and wrote something on justice, whatever, on the ground. He can do all that Minnesota nice stuff that he wants. But technically, when he gets down to it, he has the power to decide if these officers that arrested that black CNN reporter, who identified himself as a reporter, but still was arrested, if they had jobs. Those cops in New York City that rolled over that group of people, I'm sure they're still working. Why? Because we have not fixed the structure of what's happening in this country. And so to answer your question, a long way of saying, I would hope that, like, I can't be a one-man protest, but I would hope that we would still be out there in these streets, making sure that we're organized, ultimately voting and protesting as well.
You are listening and watching part one of a special three-part series on the Daily Drum. This is what justice looks like in black and white. It is an examination of issues that have come into focus since the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. I want to follow up on that one point, because when you're talking about the arrest of the reporter, one of the things that I think goes to your point that a lot of people miss, when the reporter said, "Why are you arresting me?" the response from the state police officer was, "I'm just following orders." And so this isn't about the people who arrested him. This is about the people who gave him the orders. And I think that's the systemic racism. I think that's the power piece there that I think a lot of people aren't really paying attention to. Go ahead.
And as much lip service as we get from, I'm good friends with the mayor of Minneapolis. Minneapolis is not that big, right? So like me and Jacob Fryer are actually friends, right? The governor, I don't know him, seems like a good guy. But like, as much as the lip service, they're now saying Black Lives Matter. They can say that word now. They're now at the point where they're able to say, like, it's because of the systematic problems that Black people are angry. They can say those words. But when I've sat in this apartment for 3.5 months, while the media has told me that the reason that me and my family and everybody that's listening and watching here are more likely to catch and die from COVID, not because we are somehow genetically inferior to the white people, but because this system has been set up that Black people are more likely to catch COVID. And then now I watched his brother out there die. So I think that yes, the fervor is real. And yes, we need to keep up to change the system that we aren't back on this in 3 months, in 6 months, or a year from now.
Andre, as one of the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who have been protesting over the past week, and this goes back to the original question about, do protests work? What does justice look like? What do you want to see come out of your efforts as a young Black woman in the streets raising your voice?
So Black Lives Matter has most recently put out their demands. One of them is to defund police departments and to defend Black lives. And I'm in complete alignment with that. I'm going to speak on this from the lens of an educator, from an educator's perspective. Something that I've noticed offering my education services as a teacher, creative arts educator in DC and in Virginia. Arlington, Virginia has the most one of the wealthiest school systems in America, in comparison to DC, which is much more lower ranking. And what I see in these school systems, when comparing the two, is in DC schools, our young people, most Black and brown kids, confront the police before they even hit the classroom, which is a problem. Take police officers out of the schools. That's one thing that I would want to see. Pulling up these police officers out of schools. It might be an unpopular opinion, but take them out. I go into Arlington school system schools, and I don't see a police officer in sight. Most of the kids that are in these schools are white young people, right? The amount of trauma that our young people have to go through just to get to the classroom and being in the presence of an officer, being touched and patted down before they even hit the book, before they even hit an English class, is problematic. Something else that I would like to see done in regards to defunding police departments is for the money, the millions of dollars that are going into these police departments, to be invested elsewhere, to be invested in community grassroots programs. I think about programs like a Black Swan Academy led by Samantha Davis, which promotes civic leadership amongst young people. She takes her young people out to town halls and to speak to very influential people in DC so that their voices are heard and so that they are part of this movement for Black lives. Funding organizations like the National Bailout or Free Black Mamas DMV, with Janae Taylor, one of my friends, Janae Taylor, who was a leader in the Black Youth Project 100, fundraising in order to pull women out of prison who are out of jail, out of prison, who cannot afford their bail, whose families cannot afford their bail. Organizations like Casa Ruby and LAYC and Smile, who are dedicated to uplifting and serving LGBTQ plus communities. Defund police departments and put that money into spaces that really need it, spaces that are affected most, right? That are in the marginalized communities, Black and brown people, LGBTQ plus people, trans folk. That's what I would like to see. And so I hope that these efforts, as my brothers are saying, what happens next? We get done, then what? Are we still fighting? I think that a big part of this movement, as Dr. Shabazz has said, is being radical. We're done with peaceful protesting. I'm done with going out there, much like we did for Mike Brown and marching around the streets, he, ha, ha, hoo, hoo, Mike Brown, Emmett Till, how many Black people will you kill? I'm sorry to say this, I'm ready to tear down some police departments. I'm ready to go in and burn down some buildings, because if that's what it's going to take in order for you all to charge these police officers, I'm down for it. I'll be the first one out there. As my brother said, here's my lighter. Here's my lighter. You got my lighter. I'm ready, because no one is going to listen. We're done with the peaceful protesting. It's time for radical change. And if that radical change involves for some buildings to get burnt down that have insurance, exactly. we're down. We're down for the cause.
Dr. Shabazz, one of the things that I've often wondered about, and I've spoken about this as recently as last week. The Million Man March, for example, more than 20 years ago, made a lot of Black folks feel good. But I would argue only Black folks were listening. Who is this protest for? Who should be listening? Is this for white people? Is this protest the protest that should say not "I can't breathe," but "I told you so"?
I think that this is beyond protest. I think we've entered into a kind of a zone that could be called revolution. And it's not just a protest or an objection, but people want a complete constructive change. Some reforms must be advocated for. Well, I specifically state that the doctrine of qualified immunity should be abolished, and people say that the vote is the way. Well, that should come through the House, the Senate, signed by the president. That qualified immunity and the laws that give the police a dramatically increased amount of leeway to use force versus the average citizen. This lets a lot of police officers off criminal prosecution as well as civil liability. Qualified immunity must be abolished. It'd be interesting to see whether Minnesota, and in specific this county, in this county, the county of Hennepin, to see whether or not they are really seriously address the training, the policies, and the practices of that police department, or whether they give lip service to it, or whether they actually make training. In civil lawsuits, we often sue the county and we charge them with 1983 failure to train and failure to supervise. And most of the time those lawsuits are settled, but we really did not get that change in that department. They might pay money out, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, but did that change that was sued in that complaint, did that change actually take place?
Well, let me
that's what Andre wants to know.
Let me stop you right there, because I'm a taxpayer, okay? And those lawsuits that were settled, for example, the lawsuits that have been settled right here in Baltimore, I paid my taxes. I don't like what led up to those lawsuits, but I don't feel that in my pocket. When the city of Baltimore or the District of Columbia or Minneapolis or New York or Miami pays out these lawsuits, that's not hitting me where I'm hurt. The thing that hits me is the thing that led me up to it, which brings me to a feeling of anger and frustration that Andre mentioned earlier. Now, certainly we're not going to, advocate violence. I will give, Andre the youthful impetuous expression, but I don't want to see you in jail. But how do you, Mike, channel the anger to change beyond the protests?
I mean, people have got everybody that's listening to my voice should log on and fill out their census tonight. Make sure they fill out their census and then get on their phone and tell 5 friends and family to log on and fill out their census. The census is ultimately how we get counted and funds get redistributed to us. We got to fix. And then voting, obviously register to vote, make sure we go out and vote. Local, go vote down the ballot, all the races, make sure we're voting for county attorneys, make sure we're voting for judges, and keep the heat up. I was taking notes of what Dr. Shabazz was saying. I agree with all that. We got to fix the qualified amnesty. I will say that another problem we have here in Hennepin County is that we've got a racist police chief by the name of Bob Kroll, who is, police union president. Let me make sure I get it. Union president. We have to figure out how the unions actually have power over what cops get away with. For example, right now, in the middle of all this, in the middle of a worldwide riot started right here in my backyard, the police union would like to change their union contract to say that if you're fired for discharging a weapon early, hit someone, and you're fired for it, you get to reapply for your job a couple years later. So they are still right now trying to get more power for police while we are trying to get them more accountable. So fill out the census, make sure we vote, but still let's be active in these streets, because because all these systematic problems add into the fact that he was able to feel like he can choke out a black man in this city on a holiday in broad daylight and kill this man. And the reason he felt so cavalier and so like I'm not held accountable to do it, is because there has been little tiny grasp of power by the police department in this city and around the country through union contracts and through not being held accountable, and that this police officer thinks that he has the ability to do it. We need to take some power back. Fill out the census, vote, but also I say we keep the heat up in cities around this country and make it a long, hot summer. And we're going to keep, as Dr. Shabazz just said, the only reason these police officers are not walking around the streets of Minneapolis today is because we burned down this precinct. And we have been peacefully protesting since then. And they're listening to us because there's thousands of people in the streets. So I think, like, yes, census, yes, voting, but let's keep up the pressure and let's keep up the protest in the streets as well.
Explain that to me a little bit more. You're suggesting that because the police precinct in Minneapolis burned, that was the pushback for the police department to let people know that, oh, we are serious?
Yeah, I think there's no way, and I quickly answer that. There's no way that officer was charged the next day. If you were in Minneapolis and watched the timeline, Mike Friedman came out on TV and said there was not enough. He came out with two other white people from like the attorney general or somebody else who said like Trump's watching this, and came out and said there's no more evidence. I was there at the precinct when we got the news, and it shocked us like to our core. Our core. And that was the moment where we said, you know what? The system is messed up. The system is messed up. And I'm 100% sure that if we didn't take a radical action right then and there, those officers would still be walking around, and Mike Freeman would still be hiding behind we're investigating, trying to get us tired to get distracted again so we can get back on this hamster wheel that I've been talking about.
Dr. Shabazz, you were going to say something.
I want to say, your first point is well taken. We have a massive 12 noon demonstration at the White House, and we're asking for millions to gather at the White House and at the precincts all over the country on Saturday, as well as every day they're gathering, but specifically on Saturday. The largest gathering at the White House and at all your precincts, Blackout Saturday. We support that. I do want to say, you asked a question about the Million Man March and others. Who was it directed to? You see, that was directed, it was supposed to be towards ourselves. Mm-hmm. It was supposed to be an effort where Black men took greater control of our communities and our affairs. And as a veteran of that march, I think we kind of missed the ball, to be honest. We're supposed to have some community policing in place. We're supposed to be at a greater level of what they call kujichagulia, or self-determination, where we don't have to just have white racist police officers directly preying on us. There's supposed to be organizational formations in between. I do want to say, Andre, before that cop was charged, the night of your demonstration, I want to say that we thought we gave you an assist. I happen to be friends, very close. I'm the former chairman of the new Black Panther Party. We sent a press release out 24 hours ahead of that arrest, saying that if you don't arrest Chauvin by tomorrow, that Black Lawyers for Justice in the new Black Panther Party, under Minnesota Statute 629.37, that we're going to come to his house and make the citizen's arrest. And we're going to make it on 6/5 if you don't get him now. We did it with George Zimmerman, and they somehow found him out the next day and got him. And we're not saying we're responsible, but we're saying we gave you an assist. Whatever you were doing there, we said straight up, we're going to come get him if you don't get him. And you better believe they went out there and got him that next day.
Here's the problem. Absolutely. And thank you for that, brother. Well, but I will say our fear on the ground was that he was in Florida. Give you a little bit backup take. So the fact that he was out of jail so long, and this is how crazy the system could have gotten real fast.
Who was in Florida?
That we thought he left the state. That we put heat on him Tuesday and Wednesday, and before they charged him on Thursday, that somehow he got into a backseat and was gone, and then whether or not he was in a Trump state, and then whether or not they would defend him. So the reason I'm saying we gotta get off this hamster wheel, because we could have gone into a situation real quick where the next brother gets killed, the cop realizes I'm in trouble, you go to a state that's a friendly state. And then now what? Is it the state of Florida is going to turn to the U.S. Marshals going to bring him back to get him back to Minnesota? I mean, it could have quickly gone even more out of control radical, where I think even more people are in the streets if he would have escaped out of the state and would not have been arrested. We could have charged him. He could have been out of the state because we gave him 3.5 days. Just put another idea on the ground about what was happening, because we didn't know if he was actually going to be cuffed and walked into prison or not.
Dr. Shabazz, I don't want to have my point missed, because I do want to make sure that I was clear when I was talking about the Million Man March, and like you said, and like I suggested, that was for us. And this is why I mentioned that, because I was in Columbus, Ohio. I was a TV reporter at the NBC affiliate on that day in Columbus. And one of the things that was happening all over the country was that because there were so many Black men, what we now call, because of COVID-19, frontline workers, transportation workers, grocery store people, business owners and managers, they essentially shut down Columbus and other cities like that. But then they came back to work on Monday. There has been a pledge to not spend money on July 7th. And then what are they going to do on the 8th? Because the United States has come through a massive economic downturn, the biggest economic disaster imposed because of COVID-19. I'm that July 7th, I'm like, a day? Are you kidding me? When people haven't been working for 3 months? So my question is, is this protest the new wave? This is
only if it's a protest. Only if it's a protest and not a movement. After mobilization, you must have organization. Now, I want to say that I want to talk to the new leaders out there. See, like the brothers and sisters that you have on here are the ones that can make the change. Systematic changes. It's true. If you have a big march and the leadership does not have firm instructions and follow up, and they're happy to have a crowd, then things won't go right.
America has a attention.
We want this. We have a demonstration at the White House at 12 noon Saturday. We're calling for millions. But what is the follow-up after that? Well, Black Lawyers for Justice is instituting police training, is introducing online and in-person police training and survival skills. And that's something that more and more people are going to hear about. I'm going to be conducting that every week. Groups that are out here that, like, I'm putting pressure on the new Black Panther Party. You have to establish, and these other groups that you see out here holding guns, well, we're being killed by officers with guns. We must have active police patrols in our community. We must have organized police patrols. So there are policy changes that we ourselves must make. We must have a policy of activism and engagement. That's a policy in and of itself, just to keep the pressure on all of these pressure points, the governors, the mayors, and all of that. That's a policy of pressure, not just a moment. A policy of constant pressure for change. That's a policy.
But I want to say, and Andre has been somewhat modest. And I know her very well. She just went on this run about what essentially is criminal justice reform. And that's great. But also when you talk about young people such as Henri and such as Mike, when people like Henri are literally planting seeds in young people's minds, I'm talking about people under the age of 10, to not only understand what it means, the history of Black and brown people in this country. Henri, I'm giving you the plug because this is what you do. To whether it be through music, through education, through conversation, to also understand, to recognize racism when you see it instead of saying, I wonder is that. So, that is, I think that yes, we do need policy, but we also need to plant those seeds so that the trees that grow do not have the literal and philosophical nooses of racism on them. Talk to me a little bit about that, Henri.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why it's important, as I had mentioned, when we talk about defunding police departments and investing in spaces that empower young people to, to exercise skills and, criminal justice, or even just to open space, safe space for them to have conversations. I run an art studio space called Art Lab at the Smithsonian. I run team programs at the Smithsonian Institution, and I have a space called Art Lab, and kids come there after school. And just thinking about other after school spaces, particularly at Art Lab, we do our best to make sure, number one, I make sure that the staff that are in place reflect the young people that come into our space. Most of the kids that come into our space are Black and brown kids. And so while they may not be able to have conversations about what's happening in school, right? Go to class, learn English, stay on topic. We don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. Our school is, funded by the government. We can't have conversations about Donald Trump, right? So they come to us. We better be able to open space for them to have these conversations, to vent, to decompress. Another thing that I think is really important is self-preservation, having a space for them to come and to seek healing. I remember having a young person come to me, Miss Henri, I had to run home in the rain yesterday. Well, okay, what happened? I couldn't use my hood. I had a black hoodie on, and I was afraid to put my hood on because I thought that a police officer would shoot me. What? Probably not a conversation that you're going to have in the school, but a conversation in our space, a safe space that they can come to and see people that look like them, that are demonstrating the methods that we want to put in place, or that we are putting in place to fight for our freedom, right? Conversations that you can have with us, that you can trust us to be able to give you feedback on, and to help you to understand and unpack what just transpired. The fact that this young person could not put his hood on to run home in the rain, and even run. He said, I had to walk. I didn't want anyone to see me running. I didn't want to have my hood on, just referencing Trayvon Martin, right? It's a problem. How we need to open spaces for our young people to have these conversations. They're not happening in schools. I know, because I've taught in the school system. They're not happening in the schools. I have had conversations with principals and with administration, being scolded. No, we're not having these conversations. This is not meant for our space. This is not meant for our school. So, okay, now I'm in the after school space. Now I'm in a space where I know that I can offer that to our young people because it's important and it's necessary. I can't be out here, just ignoring what's happening. My kids are looking at me. They're looking at me. They're DMing me. Hey, Miss Henri, we see you online. We see you, at these protests. We want to be out there. I want to come out there and meet you up there. You know what I'm saying? Like, they see us. You know what I'm saying? So we have to be that example. And so again, defund these police departments and put that money in places that can offer our young people these safe spaces to be able to have these conversations, and to seek that healing, to be informed, to be in front of people like, who I have on this call right now. That's super, super important.
Yeah, I have 30 seconds for each of you. I'll start with you, Mike. What's tomorrow mean for you in Minneapolis and this struggle?
Tomorrow is sad day in Minneapolis. It's going to be the funeral, George, and I'm going to be out at Cup Foods the majority of the day. It I would like us to think of that day as for me, as a day of how we should not allow the next George Floyd to be me, to be my cousin, to be my nephew. And in order to do that, we need to fix the systemic problems that are happening in this country, the long-standing racism that is happening in this country, defunding from a police state to a caring state, and make sure that Black Lives Matter. Thank y'all for having me, Howard.
Dr. Shabazz, what do we need to get a conviction for all of these officers in this case? What is your tomorrow looking like?
Oh, you got to keep the pressure on. You got to keep constant pressure on if you even want to dream of getting a conviction. I say they're going to try to take pleas, but you got to keep constant pressure on. That's why this Saturday, 12 noon, we're calling for a massive demonstration at the White House and up to 1 million there and around the country in all of the cities. Everybody should take to the streets. We must continue the police training. Black Lawyers for Justice WHUR. We have blackrightsmatter.com. We have to have self-defense. We have to have constant organizing, and you have to have support for this strong young generation from persons like myself. Man, I support all of y'all. Y'all should reach me. You can text me at 202-875-9623. You young revolutionary sisters and brothers, you have an unbridled supporter and a legal advocate also. I'm here to support you. If we keep strong like this, sir, we'll see some changes. And nothing else to me is going to work right now.
Andre, are you going to be out for the next protest? What is your tomorrow looking like?
It's been hard. It's been tiring. My tomorrow looks like creating and out contributing to the movement. I consider myself a liberation music maker, and so I have an album out called the Black Joy Experience in collaboration with the Black Youth Project 100, where we have taken liberation chants and freedom songs and freedom messages from the movement, from young activists from all over the nation, and have transformed them into hip hop and soul songs. And the purpose of it is for people to be able to have the language, and even just kind of like the rally cries, the ability to unite people at these protests. And so it's creating. It's, Nina Simone once said that it is our duty as artists to make music or to make art that reflects the times. And so it looks like creating. It looks like continuing to be out in these streets and to being radical in hopes for radical change.
Well, I want to thank all of you for participating in this really great discussion. Andre, no burning of buildings. We need your voice. And we don't need it from behind bars. We need it on the street. Dr. Shabazz, thank you so much for sharing with us, as well as Michael Griffin. We really appreciate you. Keep doing the work that you are doing as well. We really appreciate you. Thank you so very, very much. And we will continue this very important fight and issue as we move forward. And we want to remind you to join us Thursday night for part 2 of this 3-part series. The focus tomorrow, the 2 pandemics, preventing further harm and healing the pain. This has been a special edition of the Daily Drum. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.